That one's not, that's all the heads.
Oh, okay, yeah, so the.
This
like
one
they
was a
unboxed it.
big box that was kind of grayish color, but I didn't dig around.
Okay, so one of the very first things, which this is actually in like the last slide, but one of the things that you need to be aware of when working with Inventor is that you have to be on the network. And I know we were talking about logging into VPN just a minute ago, but the VPN, they've changed it a little bit. Like I can get to my H drive, but it is not recognizing the Inventor licensing. So I don't know that it's full on access. So I don't know that we're actually going to be able to get in there today. But the good news is I have saved all the videos that Brian made, and I have pulled all of those together, and then I can share all of those with you. But that's one of the things that you need to check beforehand, is that you make sure Inventor is on everybody's computer that you're going to be working with. And then typically what we would do is like a week or so in advance, maybe 2 weeks if you've never looked at it before, just have the kids log in. They can come in and have them double click on it, log in, see if they can get the screen to come up. That way you won't prepare all your lessons and then find out you need a new push from your TST, or there's licensing issues, because with the newer version that they rolled out last year, we noticed there were some issues with licensing. Having access, having the right number of licenses. So that's almost something that maybe you could do at the very beginning of the year, is just, hey, everybody log in and see if you have access to this, because this is definitely a software that takes a little bit more support.
That's a great, yeah, definitely great. That's big, flashing letters, big tip.
Okay, and then when Brian was asked about this last week, like what kinds of issues and stuff, I just went back to what we had when we created the balsa wood glider, and we kind of did it in 2 phases. Like part 1 was where we went in and we all designed the same exact balsa wood glider. We did the measurements up front, which I forgot, I brought an example. Just to kind of level set where we are in that process. So with the calipers and the measuring, we had a handout with all of the pieces and parts, and then the students were given all the pieces and parts and the calipers, and they went through and they measured all of the things. This is what they did on their own, and so you'll see one of my helpful hints later on is that eventually you need to discuss their measurements and what it actually should look more like. But I understand the whole process of having them do it together, comparing it with their neighbors and all that kind of stuff. So I did bring a couple examples. Again, this is just one way we did it, so however you want to do it. But if you want to pass those around, you can kind of look at it, because this is assuming that you have done.
The balsa wood stuff are now those hard cardstock planes I brought you is basically this. The dimensions should be basically the same, except the tail vertical stabilizer and the fuselage is now 1 piece instead of 2 pieces.
Okay. So assuming all of that has been done then, so this is where we're starting then. Part 1, measure the glider with the calipers and the rulers. Capture the data, so then there is the PDF version of what I just am passing around the table right there. And then, so that should be what you're looking at.
We swapped, one of the changes is to go to those cardstock gliders, because the balsa gliders are so expensive. And kids, as you know, with the foam gliders, they destroy them. So this is a little more cost effective than get the same result.
And then part 2 is then using your data to create your 3D model in Inventor. So we start off with the first part. Now, because we experienced a new version of Inventor over this time period, This first video is kind of walking through old version Inventor, new version Inventor. If you're starting off brand new, you don't need to, like, you don't have that frame of reference. But Brian does have a great video that was created here that is just drawing a part. So if you're dealing with slower level, maybe we need to scaffold and we just need to start with building just a basic part and then build up into the airplanes. So this first video right here, you may or may not need, just depending on your level of experience and your student's level of experience. Then I broke it down into the vertical stabilizer, which again, if this is a little bit different, your dimensions or your parts might be different, but this would be a good tutorial. Again, if you're starting out and you don't know anything about Inventor, you could go through these tutorials and use, because the functions of using the dimensions, extruding it, drawing it, the campers, finding all of those things, all of that's going to be in here, even if your final design looks a little bit different. Then the second video is the horizontal stabilizer. And then we get into the fuselage. And then we step through the wing. Now, the first time out, the glider wing for everybody is the same. We all have the same measurements, we all have the same page, we all have the same stuff. And so the first time we would go through it, we would do it all together, okay? And these videos are kind of broken down into what we could do in a class period. And I know it seems a little funny because you're like, that's a 4-minute video, how is it taking up 45 minutes? But if you have ever tried to drag middle school students through a tool like this, you understand that a 4-minute video can take 80 minutes to teach. So I also recommend having the videos because you do have so many different levels of students that even taking 2 class periods to walk them through a vertical stabilizer, they will still need a video, and they will still be doing it 3 weeks later trying to catch up. So after we draw all the individual parts, all of us together, and a lot of this is really modeling because there is a technique to following a video to create something. So a lot of this is like I literally go step by step with the entire class, and I'm walking around and we're step 1, pause. Everybody does it. Step 2, pause. Everybody does it. And because this is a little bit more complicated software, I don't remember having issues where students were just like, oh, I'm so bored. Like, it goes very quickly because they're all very, like, very detailed.
Yeah, never had to say, I'm done, I'm bored. It's more, it's like, wait, stop. But how'd you do that?
Yeah. A lot of back up, repeat. Back up 10 seconds, repeat, back up 10 seconds, repeating. So this very first part, introducing it to students, is very heavy on the modeling. And I felt like if you do very heavy on the modeling on this part, then when they redesign their own wing on the back half, at that point, we're cutting them loose. You've got what we did together in class, you've got support videos, but it's now time for you to create. This is your design, your creation, you go draw it. And that led to more summative assessments at that point. So I felt like we did a lot of heavy modeling on the front end to really turn it over to student based on the back end.
And when did you say, oh, the back end?
Yeah, so when you do the, you go out, you fly the glider, you collect your data, you understand how it works, you start exploring all the different wing designs, and then the last part of it is the design challenge where you get to redesign your wing to your own ideas, your own data, your own all of that. That's the second part that I'm talking about. We would have them redesign it with their new wing so that they have a presentation.
So with the different ability groups, like what, you were saying something about 3 weeks, you would still have kids 3 weeks later doing something. Like how are you managing that?
Oh, and I have some helpful hints. I'm gonna circle back to that in just a minute. Yeah, because I've got some things about that as
So
well.
everybody's doing different things, or are you moving right along on schedule?
Pretty much on schedule, but I mean, I will say there is a point where you have to be like, okay, like, let's move forward. And there's some supports put in place, and I'll show you that in just a second. So after you have your 4 parts, it roughly takes 4 class periods. And again, day 1 took way longer. That's why we typically started with like a small part, because it just took way longer to get everybody in, everybody understanding all the pieces and parts. And then by the 3rd or 4th day, the kids get it. They get that you're modeling, they get that you're following the video. A lot of times I found they already had the video, like some of my higher flyers, they already had the video open, and they were following, right? So they might have been running ahead of me, which again, I level set. If you're gonna do that, you're on your own. If you get stuck, you have to move back to where I am right now with the entire class. So there was some of that involved, and they were fine. And then when they got stuck, they were like, okay. And they came back and they caught up with the class, and they would move forward like that too. So having the videos out on Google Classroom, it's a good way to account for those kids that do pick up real quick and want to move ahead. So we do the 4 parts, then we get into the glider assembly, and this is kind of broken into 3 different videos, how to get it all together. And then this piece is the exploded view, where it turns into something that they can actually print. All your parts are labeled, like you've assembled the plane, but then in Inventor you can pull it apart so you have that constructed engineering type view where it explodes all your parts back out and labels everything, and that's typically what we would have them print for their end project.
The kids really, to me, it seemed the kids liked making the plane parts, but when they were taking the parts that they made and putting it together, it goes like, see, it looks like a plane. It looks exactly like the plane that you designed. Here it is. And they seem to be really excited about being able to like, oh, look, I made this. Kind of thing. That was kind of cool. And the exploded version, that was something that we added that was really cool to see how each part shows where each part goes with dotted lines. That's basically the plane going.
Like stretched out like.
Yeah.
So you can do this, like you can go as deep as your students can allow for, right? It may be that the assembly and the exploded view is something that you give to your high flyers, right? They've got it, they picked it up, they drew it, they put it all together, and you're still trying to work with 70% of the class to get them to create their parts. So maybe your high flyers move on to this. We did it all together. So that takes me back to your question, Tommy. So these are some of my helpful hints that I tried to write down just in working with Inventor and working with the students. So test Inventor access with the students prior to the unit. Check for your licensing issues. That's just a Gwinnett County thing. So make sure they can get in, make sure you have access. I would even try and have them even try to save something because there were some issues with that. So to address your question, Tommy, at a certain point, because I was doing it with them, I had my teacher created files. And at a certain point, some students were just not there. They were not ready to do the assembly. They were not ready to move on. Either they missed the entire week, or they just weren't capable of putting all the parts together, or they gave up. Whatever the case may be, we always had students that just weren't there yet. And since we were using it as a summative, right, we didn't want to just leave them, like if you can't do part 1, you're never gonna get to building it. So we had support files, which basically was, since I'm up there modeling and creating all of this with you, 7A and 7B, I had 2 sets of support files.
Yeah, booster files.
Yeah, we called them booster files, and when we got ready to do the assembly, you have to have all your parts. So for the student that missed the 1 day and missed the fuselage, for the student that just isn't at that level, you know, they may have built something, they may not have built something, they need those booster files so that they can continue on moving forward. And it basically was all 4 plane parts that I made, and we put them out on Google Classroom, and then they were able to use those so that they weren't just forever behind because they missed 1 day or just weren't at that level. Another helpful, I had the piece of paper there that they filled out, but prior to getting into that, we did have a day where we gave them, compare yours measurements to my measurements. How far off are you? We had that data validation check. Because again, you don't want one student, because they use their measurements to create their drawings, and you don't want one student over there using inches or not using data and just making up their own. So we did verify your data, verify that, if you're off a little bit, you can account for those different caliper ratings, but some students were just way off.
Also, what you said, using inches and millimeters, when you're doing that, make sure that Inventor is set to the measurement unit that you're using, because we've had people, and this is part with their 3D printing, that they made the measurements in millimeters and didn't realize the Inventor was on inches, and that's why their print job is ginormous instead of being this big, because they didn't check Inventor to make sure it was set.
Modeling how to follow video as you create the design. So that was part of like the teaching, that front end piece. Like we watch 10 seconds of do this, and then we pause the video, and now we all do this. Just recognizing that there's a lot of learning that takes place in that modeling of the videos and how to follow a video or a technical video, and completing those steps. And again, I wrote up here, walking the students through how to do these drawings together at the beginning, especially when it was all the same dimensions, the exact same airplane. We just drew it all together and just built that base for really how to use the tool and how to create these parts and pieces. Then, when it becomes their own creation, then you cut them loose with their own measurements, their own drawing in Inventor at that point. And you still have your booster files. So if you have a student who is not going to recreate all 3 pieces, and you would just be really happy if they did their new wing design, have them use those booster files, and then have them focus 3 days on just building their new wing, right? So you can really scaffold it that way. And then again, I mean, if Brian's okay with it, I'll share this presentation and these
Please.
videos with you.
Please.
Use recordings, because having these videos for students who are absent, for students who just didn't get it, they have to come in for remediation, whatever the case may be, having this video for them to go back, and so you are not constantly having to stand up there and reteach this over and over and over again, is just a huge lifesaver.
I just use Screencastify, or I think it's now ScreenPal now, so, and just record this stuff. And for myself, when I was learning it, I would like draw the wing, then throw it away, and I would draw the wing again, then I'll throw it away, and I'll draw it again, just to get that muscle memory kind of thing on how to do it. And by my drawing it by myself, I was like, this is really, where is this thing? And that helped me figure out, if I'm having a problem with it, this is the kids are going to have a question about it. So I would say, I would be able to say, be sure to check this menu for this option, for this thing. Kemper is underneath this menu. Depending on how your menu bar is set up, it might be sitting there jumping out at you, but it may be in a drop-down menu. So doing that, and I did this also with my foundations kids and stuff, going over it and doing it over and over, and have videos. I made videos for my foundation kids. We spent 4 or 5 weeks doing 2D drawings and 3, 4, or 5 weeks doing 3D modeling kind of thing, just over and over and over. At the beginning, one drawing took multiple days. At the end, complete a complex drawing in 1 class period.
Yeah,
It makes a difference.
They build their skills quickly, but I feel like, don't you feel like the modeling, just really everybody doing it together, going
Absolutely.
through, built that foundation,
Yes.
and then they were just much more successful, I
Especially the
think.
slower kids, they felt able to stay with the group because everyone's moving along at the same pace. They don't feel left behind, or because everyone's chugging along the feast at the beginning, we're all gonna do this. And then after they've gone through a couple of lessons, like, okay, a little more, the release of control kind of thing. And they're able to do that. And having the booster files, I can't tell you how valuable That is, it helped me learning how to draw it, because I drew them, but then the kids who just can't get the drawing done, or for whatever reason, to say, okay, time to move on, here's the completed file, let's go to the next step.
So what are they doing with the completed file? Is there anything that they're doing, or is it kind of like,
Well, the,
okay,
And
this is just to move on?
So in order to do the assembly,
Yeah.
you have to have the 4 parts.
Right,
If they don't have the 4 parts, they can't assemble the plane.
right.
So having the booster files are basically the 4 parts already made. So again, maybe they have 3 parts, maybe they only got 2 parts done, right? They were absent,
It'll
whatever
fill
the
in the
case may be.
gaps.
That, yeah, it fills in whatever gaps are created. And if you're doing it with the students, you're creating your own booster files. It's not really any,
it was really valuable
extra
for the
work.
kids who were behind, because you say, okay, we're doing the assembly, but you have 2 parts you have to make to get, and they're already moving slower than anybody else. So are they about to abandon it completely? Or, so, okay, I've seen you've done this much, you can get this much credit or whatever for what you've done so far. Here's the part already made, let's move on to the next part, so you can start off on point 0 with everybody else and not feel you're getting further and further behind.
So Jennifer,
So,
what you just shared with us and the different parts and kind of from start to finish, if you're on schedule, about how long did that take in your time, in your class?
I'd have to go back and look at it.
2
'cause we-
weeks, 3 weeks, 1 week?
the plane itself took about a week. But then getting into, I would think, the plane, that's 4 parts, so I think about a week for the
4
4
parts, but then the assembly and the exploded view.
Yeah, that was like 2-3 days each.
Yeah, so I'd say a week and a half,
Okay, and what's your class time budget? What was it?
45 minutes,
45 minutes, a week and a half.
every day. We saw kids every day,
Okay, 5 days a week.
correct.
Yeah,
Oh, and then, what's the kind of example, so you just had a week and a half, how you went to the grade book for this?
So,
Over a week and a half.
so I would have given them a grade for each part and the assembly.
So,
Because some kids are gonna get all 4 parts and the assembly, and some kids are not. Some kids are gonna get 1 part, 2 parts.
But now we're down to 3 parts, right, because of the.
It's not- it's
tail
not- it's only-
being
it's only
merged.
three
But now
parts.
it's down to 3 parts, so there might be a little bit of savings there.
so what would be an 80 versus
The what?
90 or 70, or is it pass
What's the
fail?
part
You did it, you didn't do it?
The fuselage.
The
So,
What did you guys take out?
pretty
we
much.
didn't take out combined,
Yeah,
because originally there were 4
pretty,
parts, you
like,
had
there's
the
a 100 is
fuselage,
gonna be perfect.
vertical and horizontal stabilizer in the wing.
Yes.
90s would have come in
Vertical
because there's
stabilizer
certain
and
things that they
fuselage
can do in
is
there
now
that,
one part.
Okay.
So you look at it,
make it a
goes,
little
there-
off, like the
Okay.
measurements are off,
So
they
when
didn't
you're-
get, they built a
When we're
fuselage,
still
but they
doing
left out
the
the
measurement
parts.
piece, you can have them.
So, it might be 5.5.
It's just, those 2 pieces are,
They built
because
it, and
remember,
they
because
didn't
it's
have
cut
any
out,
dimensions on it, their dimensions aren't labeled.
use the cricket to cut out the
those
card
kinds of
stock.
Did
things.
you give them
So
a
it's-
sheet and
instead of
say this is where
trying-
I'm coming with
because
the points, or
the-
you just kind of
balsa wood, there's a
do it
slot.
yourself?
I don't
Stick it in
remember,
there,
I don't
it's like,
think we
okay,
have
we
a
can't do
rubric.
that, so I just
Maybe
said,
at the
okay, we
end,
just,
the end one that we used as a
Design it.
summative, we might have, because again, it was kind of designed where even if they couldn't, like if it took them the 3 weeks, the 4 weeks to get all the way to the end, and really all they did was design a new wing, that's really what we're measuring, right? That new wing. So that would have been your summative. Could you fly the new wing? Could you justify why your wing was the best based on your data? That was the end all summative. And then everything else was just kind of formative classwork type assignments.
But you didn't necessarily have a rubric laying around, you
Mm,
gave them
not
the
for
first day and
those.
said this is where we're going.
No, that might have been helpful, but we just didn't.
yeah, we had them basically, to have them download each individual file, we had take screenshots. of the- of
Oh,
the
that's a
completed
good
work.
point. Yeah, instead of, because then you have to open up every file, and then it has to open up Inventor to view it, and that is way too much time. So we would have them take screenshots, turn it into Google Classroom, because you know, in Google Classroom, when they turn in a screenshot, you can go, yep, and it's much faster. Yeah, that's, I'll have to
Yeah.
add
Much
that
easier
on.
than
And sometimes if you have an issue
Yes.
with your 3D modeling, you can put a text box in your drawing, like a pull-out or a shout-out from your design, whatever, and have them put their name on it. So we take a picture of it, it has their name on it. So if you have an issue of someone thinking that I'm gonna be your best friend by letting you have my drawing.
Oh, I
You
did
say,
have that. I had that last year. I had a student that kept coming in. This wasn't an ability issue. This was just she just couldn't get it together enough to draw these airplanes, right? So she just kept coming in, tiger time, emailing parents, gotta get this done, you're not gonna pass the class, blah, blah, blah. So all of a sudden, one morning, she's turned it in. And I'm like, huh, how does she turn in this assignment when she hasn't been here for me to help her do this? How did she suddenly, and again, Inventor is something that you could only use in my classroom, so it
Right.
wasn't like she went home and somebody helped her. So I was like, how did we suddenly get this drawing? And then I was like, let me just see what her neighbor next to her, let me just see what their plane looked like. So I open them up, and they are exact copies, and they are exact incorrect copies. So I go to the neighbor, and I'm like, hey, this is really weird. Like, I open up your drawing, and it looks exactly like her drawing. Like, even to the point where you did a little something wrong here, and hers is the exact same way. Do you happen to know how that? And he was like, yeah, I gave it a file. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Well, that explains it, thanks. I'm really glad you were honest. Gonna have to email home and let your parents know that you were cheating, but I will point out that you did own up to it and let me know what happened. And then obviously I had to write up the girl or whatever, she failed the class and all that, because we work really hard at not working. But anyway, the last thing I was gonna say about these dimension things, because I know the big thing of this program is for the students to really be in there experiencing it and learning from the mistakes, learning from the failures, learning from the things. So I know I did point out that at some point you need to verify the data with them. Even though we did that time and time again, verified that data, when it came time for them to draw their own wing, and they had their verified data in front of them, they still drew wings that were not going to fit in that fuselage.
I mean, we told how many times ad nauseum that it's gotta fit into this slot. If it doesn't fit, it won't work.
Yeah. So there was plenty of learning that still occurred even when you do those little data point check-ins
Yes.
and try to help them verify stuff.
I was just trying to observe how you manage the, hey, how come I got a 95, not 100, or why is mine a 70, or why is mine a
So
80?
in Google Classroom, I would give that feedback. Like, you're missing the slot for the wing. Your, whatever, like they were given requirements, right? Like your plane has to be assembled, all the parts have to fit together. So when you're looking at the drawing, if the assembled parts aren't together, the wing is near the plane, but not in the fuselage, then, you would count off points for that kind of thing.
But there was like no rubric.
We just did, oh, I didn't have.
It was kind of like a rubric, but we had specific requirements, so it was rubric-esque.
Yeah.
That is like a checklist. It's like, okay, the label, the plane parts have to be labeled. They have to be the right dimensions. They have to be in the right
Is that
place.
It's in that,
I don't know.
It's in that PDF.
We'll check it.
That should be the guidelines for everyone.
Yeah, that's basically, we were looking at people's ask like, why'd I get a 95? So it's like, well, you're missing this part.
I'll share that slide.
This is the wrong dimension.
Yeah, that checklist, if anything, would be really useful.
Sure. Cool. Anyhow, I'll entertain more questions, but it is lunchtime. I know the smell is killing me. So any directions about lunch and with your part?
Well, I'm actually gonna